Imagine walking away from friends, music, and laughter, and stepping straight into a mystery no one has solved. That's exactly what happened to a college student one foggy night. He left behind a house full of people, his belongings untouched, and simply disappeared into the darkness. No goodbyes, no explanation, just silence. And from that moment on, his story would shift from an ordinary night out to one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries whispered among students to this day. The house was alive that night, music pulsing through the walls, voices rising over each other, the clinking of bottles, and the occasional burst of laughter spilling into the street outside. It was the kind of gathering where time blurred, where strangers became friends for an evening, and everyone seemed wrapped in the illusion that the night would never end. Daniel wasn't the type who usually found himself in the middle of that chaos. He was quiet, studious, someone who blended into the background more than he stood in the spotlight. Friends had nudged him into coming, insisting he needed a break, that a little noise and fun might loosen the weight he always seemed to carry. At first, he played along. He sipped from a cup, nodded through conversations, even cracked a small smile when someone told a joke. But the truth was, he didn't quite belong there. Surrounded by people who laughed too loudly, danced too wildly, and drank too freely, Daniel felt like a shadow among them, present but detached. And though no one noticed, his eyes kept wandering toward the front door, as if some quiet part of him was already planning to leave. At some point, between the music and the chatter, he slipped away. He didn't announce it, didn't wave goodbye, didn't even grab the jacket draped over a chair. One moment, he was pressed against the wall with his cup in hand, and the next, the door clicked shut behind him. To everyone else, the party carried on without pause. But outside, Daniel had stepped into a different kind of silence, one that would mark the beginning of a mystery no one would ever be able to explain. The air outside was cold, damp with the kind of fog that softens the world and makes even familiar streets feel strange. Daniel walked away from the glow of the house, his footsteps swallowed by the quiet of the night. The first possible glimpse of him came from the grainy eye of a corner store security camera. The footage, time-stamped just after midnight, showed a figure in a hoodie standing across the street. For nearly 10 minutes, he didn't move. He just stood there, staring toward the dark line of trees beyond the road. No purchase, no interaction, just stillness, as though he was waiting for something. Others claim they saw him farther down the main road. A driver remembered a young man walking along the shoulder, head down, hands tucked into his pockets, ignoring the headlights that swept past. Another recalled a shadowy figure near the bus stop, lingering but never boarding. The sightings didn't align perfectly, but one thing was clear. Daniel never turned back toward campus. His path seemed to lead him farther and farther away from the lights of town, drawn instead toward the edges, toward the woods where the fog grew heavier and the night seemed endless. And then the trail stopped. The cameras caught nothing more. The witnesses' memories faded into uncertainty. It was as if he had slipped beyond the reach of the world that knew him. Inside the party, no one noticed he was gone. Music still rattled the walls, laughter still filled the kitchen, and the night carried on as though nothing had changed. To his friends, Daniel had simply stepped out early. Maybe he'd gone back to his dorm. Maybe he just wasn't feeling it. Nothing unusual. But the next morning, the silence became impossible to ignore. His roommate woke to find Daniel's bed untouched, the sheets still neatly made. His phone was still sitting on the desk, his wallet and student ID beside it, and the jacket he always wore in the fall was hanging untouched on the back of his chair. By the afternoon, worry had turned to panic. Calls to his family went unanswered. His professors confirmed he hadn't been to class, and when campus security checked, there was no sign of him anywhere on the grounds. The search began almost immediately. Friends printing missing posters, volunteers walking the streets, officers questioning anyone who might have seen him after he left that party. What baffled everyone was how quickly the trail went cold. It was as if Daniel had walked straight out of the house, stepped into the fog, and simply never returned. Each unanswered question only sharpened the fear. Why had he left? Where could he have gone without money, without a phone, without even his jacket? The night that started with music and laughter had now unraveled into whispers, confusion, and the first echoes of a mystery that still hasn't found its ending. When the initial sweep of streets and neighborhoods turned up nothing, attention shifted to the woods that bordered the town. It was a place students knew well, a patch of trails often used for hiking, for late-night walks, even for the occasional bonfire. But when search teams stepped beneath those trees looking for Daniel, the woods felt different. Volunteers moved in lines, calling his name through the fog. Flashlights cut across the undergrowth, beams bouncing off twisted branches. Trained dogs led the way at first, noses pressed to the damp earth, but the trail vanished within minutes of entering the forest. One handler later admitted it was as if the scent had been swallowed whole, gone without direction or trace. Day after day they combed the area. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights sweeping the canopy. Flyers with Daniel's picture appeared on every bulletin board, every street lamp. But in the woods themselves, it was only silence that answered. No footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of a struggle. Some of the searchers described the place as heavy, almost oppressive. Like the deeper they went, the more the forest pressed in on them, unwilling to give up its secrets. And when the sun fell each evening, the trees grew darker than the night sky above them, forcing the search to pause, leaving everyone uneasy. Despite the effort, the forest yielded nothing. It was as if Daniel had stepped past the trailhead and simply dissolved into the shadows. And with every fruitless search, the mystery of his disappearance only deepened. When the initial sweep of streets and neighborhoods turned up nothing, attention shifted to the woods that bordered the town. It was a place students knew well, a patch of trails often used for hiking, for late-night walks, even for the occasional bonfire. But when search teams stepped beneath those trees looking for Daniel, the woods felt different. Volunteers moved in lines, calling his name through the fog. Flashlights cut across the undergrowth, beams bouncing off twisted branches. Trained dogs led the way at first, noses pressed to the damp earth, but the trail vanished within minutes of entering the forest. One handler later admitted it was as if the scent had been swallowed whole, gone without direction or trace. Day after day they combed the area. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights sweeping the canopy. Flyers with Daniel's picture appeared on every bulletin board, every street lamp. But in the woods themselves, it was only silence that answered. No footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of a struggle. Some of the searchers described the place as heavy, almost oppressive. Like the deeper they went, the more the forest pressed in on them, unwilling to give up its secrets. And when the sun fell each evening, the trees grew darker than the night sky above them, forcing the search to pause, leaving everyone uneasy. What unsettled investigators was not just the shoe itself, but what was missing. There were no footprints around it, no drag marks, no signs of a struggle. Just one lonely object, left in perfect stillness, as if someone had set it down on purpose. Beyond that, other so-called clues only muddied the case. Some locals swore they saw a figure wandering along the back roads days after Daniel vanished, though none of those accounts could ever be confirmed. Others whispered about voices heard in the forest at night, faint calls echoing through the trees, vanishing as soon as anyone tried to follow them. Each piece of information seemed less like an answer and more like another thread leading into the unknown. Instead of solving the mystery, the clues only made it stranger, leaving everyone to wonder, was Daniel trying to leave signs behind, or had someone else staged them? When the search failed to bring closure, whispers began to fill the silence. Everyone had their own version of what happened that night, some logical, some chilling, and others that seemed to reach beyond reason. One theory was simple. Daniel wanted to leave. Maybe the weight of school, expectations, or life itself became too much, and he chose to disappear. Supporters of this idea pointed to his quiet personality, his distance at the party, and the way he slipped out unnoticed. Perhaps he planned it. But if so, why leave without his phone, his wallet, or even a jacket on a cold night? Another possibility was darker. Some believed Daniel wasn't alone when he left. Maybe someone followed him out of that house, or maybe he stumbled into something he wasn't meant to see. The neatly placed shoe fed into this suspicion, too deliberate, too strange to be an accident. Then there were the rumors that spread among students, growing each time the story was told. Some swore the woods were cursed, that people who entered alone sometimes never came back. Others whispered about figures seen in the fog, shapes standing just beyond the tree line, watching but never approaching. To them, Daniel hadn't run away or been taken by human hands, but by something far older, something that belonged to the forest itself. Each theory only added another layer to the mystery. None provided answers. None explained why a young man left a house full of people one night, and why no trace of him has ever been found. Time moved on, but the questions never left. Weeks turned to months, and months into years, yet Daniel's disappearance remained suspended in silence. The posters faded from lampposts, the search parties disbanded, and new students came and went, carrying the story only as a whispered legend. What lingered was the unease. How could someone step out of a crowded house, walk into the night, and vanish without a trace? Friends who knew him still replay those final hours, wondering if they missed something in his expression, some clue in his words, some sign he was planning to go. His family clings to hope, refusing to believe a person can simply dissolve into the fog. On campus, Daniel's name lives on like a cautionary tale. Students tell it to each other late at night, warning against walking home alone, warning against venturing into the woods. For some, it's a ghost story. For others, it's a reminder of how fragile the line is between ordinary life and the unexplained. And through it all, one fact remains. No evidence has ever surfaced, no answers have ever come, and Daniel's story has no ending. He left a party one night and stepped into a mystery that still hangs in the air, haunting everyone who hears it. Some mysteries feel distant, tucked away in old books or long-forgotten legends. But Daniel's story isn't ancient history. It happened on an ordinary night, in an ordinary town, to someone just like us. That's what makes it so unsettling. He didn't vanish from a dangerous place or while taking some reckless risk. He was surrounded by friends, music, and laughter. And then, he was simply gone. It leaves us with a question that refuses to fade. How does a life disappear so suddenly? And why does the silence around it feel so deliberate? What do you think really happened to Daniel that night? Was it a choice, a crime, or something stranger that none of us can explain? Share your theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if stories like this fascinate you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next mystery waiting to be told. Because sometimes the scariest stories aren't fiction at all. They're the ones still missing their ending. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.